Today we have Samuel. He is talking about the developer's Declassified CVE survival guide. There isn't an expected fire drill this morning, so if the fire alarm goes off, leave and
Run.
follow instructions. So over to you, Samuel.
Sweet, thank you very much. Brief introduction. My name's Samuel. I work as a staff software engineer at Rapid7. I've spent pretty much my entire career in vulnerability management and vulnerability response. At the minute, I'm working alongside our great security researchers who are finding all of the ways to break stuff, essentially. So I'm coming at this from the perspective of a dev who is quite frequently interacting with companies and telling them, hey, great product, bad news. But yes, this is a whirlwind overview of vulnerability disclosure and the CVE process, so it is. This is supposed to be sort of a beginner level talk on this. So if you know a lot about this, let's go chat afterwards. We can talk a little bit more in depth. This is more of a big tent topic overall. So before we begin talking about vulnerability disclosure and how vulnerabilities are assigned and how we can talk to researchers about them, we need to talk about what a vulnerability actually is. The National Cybersecurity Centre has a lovely little quote there, so it does, but broadly, it is something that causes damage in a system. Vulnerabilities are typically broken down into three main categories, so they are. The first one being flaws. This is any form of unintentional functionality. You have a login page, you're taking user input, you have made it poorly, somebody has managed to dump your entire user table. That's not intentional, that is a vulnerability. We move on to features. These are intentional functionality, but it's used in a way that you weren't really expecting it to be used, and therefore it becomes an issue. Oh, neat little feature allowing you to run some commands against the host OS. That's great. Reverse shell. Somebody now has access to the machine and is using it to propagate into your customer networks. Intentional functionality, not really that well thought through, still a vulnerability. And finally, the last and everyone's favorite, user error. Someone has been tricked. All of your lovely controls have now been bypassed, and they now have access to your systems. Vulnerabilities in general fall under one of these three categories, and they are all going to be going through close to a similar process when we come to disclosure. So it is, but we really focus on flaws and features as people within the tech space, because to be blunt, user errors, that's training, that's knowledge. You can work all you want, but somebody's going to make a mistake at some point. We move on to how do we identify these vulnerabilities, because these vulnerabilities exist whether or not we know about it or not. There are plenty of vulnerabilities that scoot under the radar that nobody really knows about until all of a sudden they're on the news, somebody has got broken into. But when we do discover them, or when good actors discover them, we need to have a way to be able to organize them, identify them, categorize them, and action them. And that's where the CVE program comes in. The CVE, or Common Vulnerability Exposure, is just a standardized format. So it tells you a brief description of what the issue is, what products it affects, and most importantly for a lot of defenders or a lot of devs, it gives it a lovely little identifying number so you can query it very easily so you can. It also keeps you seeing, when you have 500 of these to patch, that they are at least differentiated from one another in a little bit. These don't happen by chance, these don't happen without effort. There is an entire program backing these, the CVE program in general. Basically a big collection of businesses, government interests, individual researchers and developers that are keeping this bureaucratic framework in place so the public is actually informed about the threats that are out there. So it is. And then one additional little definition there about a zero-day vulnerability. This is a vulnerability that is currently unknown to the developers. It is called a zero-day vulnerability because the developers have 0 days to patch it before people either begin using it or know about it. If you've seen something in the news or in a Register or Bleeping Computer article, quite a lot of the times it's going to be one of these. If you have been paged at 3 o'clock in the morning to go and update a bunch of dependencies somewhere, it could well be one of these. Within the CVE program, then, there is a hierarchical structure of how these things get reported. So it has its issues. There's a big debate going on in the security community at the minute about the validity of it. But to be blunt, it's the best we have at the minute, so we have to work with it at the minute. If something new comes along, that's great, but we work with what we have at the moment. There are different levels of organizations within this process. The first is the CNA, or the Numbering Authority. Basically, it is a group, is how they define it, typically a business, that assigns vulnerabilities or CVEs to a specific subsection of products. Microsoft is the CNA for, shockingly, Microsoft products. Quite a lot of the large businesses are going to be CNAs for their own products. You might have individuals responsible for open source projects, but essentially these are the people who are responsible for making people aware about issues in a specific set of products or tools. Then we have the next level up, which is the Numbering Authority of Last Resort. Not everybody's involved in this program. What do you do then? Well, you go and you talk to MITRE, which is the body that is over the CVE program in general, CISA, which is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency from the US government, or Red Hat, the software company, because these are the three CNAs of last resort. Essentially, if you have found an issue in a product that nothing else covers, you go and talk to one of these folks overall. And then a root, which is responsible for basically putting new people into this program and getting them trained up. In good news, in theory, the CVE assignment process is very simple. I don't want you to read through all that, because to be blunt, it never works out this way, so it doesn't. In theory, you get in contact with the CNA or the CNA of last resort. You tell them about the vulnerability. They ask you some questions about it. If it's the CNA of last resort, they might pull in a vendor if they have the ties and links to do that. All of this information is compiled together. There's a nice little CVE record written, and then that's published. Lovely rainbow in the skies, everyone's at peace. This is very rarely how it works out unless it's discovered internally. Good news, that's all the definitions out of the way to get people up to speed so we can talk through the main stuff. Why should I care about this? I am a developer, I'm a product manager. I am not working in this space. I've never had to deal with this, and I've been working in industry for X amount of years. Why should I care about any of this? Ultimately, it's more dangerous to make software pretty much every year. So it is. More software is being made more quickly with more complexity, therefore, well, also by more people who have varying levels of skill within the area. That means that over time, more and more and more vulnerabilities are being discovered. 2023 to 2024, 38.7% increase in CVEs. Remember, CVEs are not all vulnerabilities. These are just the ones we know about and have identified and have categorized. The data for 2025 there was up until the start of October. There was 3 more months for that number to surpass 2024's number. So it is. When something happens in something that you own, that you work on, then it's your problem. It's better to know about some of the things in this area beforehand than wait to suddenly get a report of, oh, my user's data is being taken, what do I do? But I work in X industry. I work in this little niche section here. I don't need to worry about this, so I don't credit to a great company, Voluncheck, for the way for the graphic. These are all of the categories of products and the companies that have known exploited vulnerabilities in the first half of 2025. This is not all vulnerabilities. This is not even all classified CVEs. These are the vulnerabilities that have been used actively against their customers and users in the first half of 2025. We go all the way down to identity management, to cloud, all the way up to open source and server softwares and edge devices, which are increasingly popular targets. Even if you're not directly using any of these, at some point you're likely going to be pulling in a dependency or pulling in or using in your actual physical network some of these devices. So even if you're like, oh, I don't see my name up there, it's going to affect you, even if you're not there, and eventually it might affect you very directly. And then finally, and maybe the more interesting bit, we are beginning to see increasing consequences and scrutiny come from businesses and even governments now over breaches and issues that have come as a result of vulnerabilities. Most interestingly off of this is that SolarWinds hack in 2024. Not only did the company get fined for it, the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer for the company, got taken to court on civil charges by this SEC as well. Most of those civil charges got dropped, to be fair, but one didn't, which is where he essentially said, we're a security company, we know what we're doing, shut up. That's paraphrased, but the court found that that was at odds with reality. So he got taken to court. He faced consequences personally. The business faced consequences financially. And there's nothing to help increase the importance of something than businesses losing money. The final thing is that not being organized, not understanding this process and understanding the domain that you're working in, is that if you aren't engaging properly, there's no reason the security researcher isn't just going to tell everybody about your issue anyway. Better to coordinate and try to get patches out beforehand than not. This is a brief timeline for, well, it was 13 vulnerabilities, but one specifically of note, between the Zero Day Initiative, ZDI, a well-known group that loves, it's owned by Trend Micro. They help other security researchers push through their advisories. And Ivanti, the rather large software and hardware giant. From November 2024 to June 2025, ZDI told Ivanti about 13 different vulnerabilities in Endpoint Manager, one of their products. 24th of July, 2025, Ivanti had communicated back for all of those, saying that they acknowledged them and that they were looking into them. Then that they would be patched sometime around September 2025, so a couple of months later, not a bad timeline. 29th of July, so 5 days later, Ivanti communicated that they actually wanted an extension up until March 2026 to resolve these issues. That's an additional 6 months on from their original date. Then finally, on 7th of October, after a lot of discussions happened in the background, ZDI publicly disclosed that CVE there, 2025-9713, alongside 12 others. ZDI called it a 0 day. It's technically not because the developers knew about it, but the developers had no patches released. They had not even really begun working on the patches for it at that point. So these just got dropped, and their customer base was basically told, we can't really help you at this point, so we can't. And as you can imagine, that sort of thing attracts some attention, so it does. Whilst none of these publications are like the New York Times, ultimately, you can see Ivanti community threads going on there, Security Week, even vulnerability management companies like Run Zero posting about this, talking about how it is a serious issue. And I can tell you right now, if I was a salesperson in a bake-off against Ivanti in and around this time period, I would have been using this at every single pitch I had, because what easy ammunition to give against your competitors than these people don't care about your data security, so they don't. With more vulnerabilities being discovered year on year, more scrutiny in the area, and ignoring it not being an option because they will still get released, you just won't have a good response to it, we ultimately want to make disclosing vulnerabilities in our code or in our products as simple as possible. And we want to be familiar with the process because, let's be blunt, if you're a programmer, you want to be writing code, you don't want to be dealing with this all the time. If we get the process down, less time spent on it, you can go back to doing stuff in the business, and you can still get a good response out there so your customers feel as if they're being supported for their security. So how does this vulnerability disclosure process work? Everybody gives a different thing for this. This is mine. This is just my breakdown of it overall. It's a broad topic, so some stuff will fall outside of this. But the first step's always the same. Somebody finds an issue in one of your products. So they do. Some security researcher somewhere or a research organization finds an issue in your software, and they are responsible, so they're going to come and tell you about it. Again, there's an entire other class here where if they're not responsible, they're just going to post it publicly without telling you anyway, or post it onto an exploit market. But we're not dealing with that here. That's a talk topic for the future, so it is. The second step then is reporting. The individual who finds this vulnerability is going to go to your company and attempt to tell you that they have found this issue in your product. Basically, if you're like a big company, they can reach out to anybody, as we'll talk about later on. If you're in an open source community and somebody finds it, I hope you like being emailed personally. Validating. Developers talk to the researcher. ultimately. Because just because somebody says there's an issue does not always mean there's an issue. There's plenty of times where people come forward thinking they've found something, and then they're told, oh, wait, no, this is literally nothing, so it isn't. You confirm if it is a true issue, and if it is a true issue, you begin to determine the scale and the scope of the impact of that issue. We move on to disclosing this, agreeing to schedules, reserving the CVE IDs, creating a fix, preparing to inform your customers, or if the researcher agrees to it, inform your customers privately. And then finally, deploying, releasing that fix, publishing the CVE records, publishing some kind of advisory telling people what the issue was and what they should do to resolve it, and hopefully crediting the researcher. Sounds incredibly simple, sounds incredibly easy to do. I have never been through a smooth disclosure process in my life, so I haven't. Ultimately, as part of the vulnerability disclosure process, as devs or as people who work in tech, as product managers and stuff like that, the areas we're going to be focused on and what we can do to improve this process is reporting, validating, disclosing, and deploying. Yes, there's loads of stuff we can do to help prevent the discovery of vulnerabilities, but again, that is a separate talk topic, or if somebody wants to talk to me about it afterwards, please do. So how can we then make the reporting of these potential vulnerabilities better? A lot of these are going to sound stupid, but you will be amazed how many places do not have this. Have a point of contact for security issues. Security researchers are not above spamming your CISO on LinkedIn until they get a response, because I've seen that happen. They are not above trying to get into meetings with your CEO to tell you that there is an issue, because you have nobody to go to tell about security issues. Going through a customer support line and trying to tell them, hey, I found a vulnerability in your product, it's really not going to work. They aren't going to be able to help. Have something dedicated to reach out to. Have a timeline for initial contact. Silence invites confusion, and if you're silent for too long, it's probably going to get dropped publicly without you really knowing about it. It's very common for silence to happen in these sorts of vulnerability disclosure scenarios. So if you just give a timeline of being like, hey, we are looking at this, we will get back to you within X time frame, not only does it hold yourselves to account that you actually have something to do there, but it means the security researcher is less likely to go, these guys don't care, publish proof of concept publicly, and then you have to deal with the fallout of that. Third, have a template for reporting issues. A lot of security researchers work independently, so they do. If you aren't looking to have a huge pile of different formats come in for you to have to deal with, always good. Nope, we're back. They put out a template to at least tell them what you want to see when you're trying to tell if these vulnerabilities are valid or not. CISA has a template for it. There's no excuses. Go pick it up and use it, or modify it, whatever you want. And then finally, sounds stupid, please name your product sensibly. Please, 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 version your product sensibly as well. Sounds stupid, you're probably sitting there going, wow, this guy's an idiot if he can't tell my product's apart. It is not until you're looking at a vulnerability in a product that's been going for 10 years, it has had 7 renames and rebrands, it's been acquired by 3 different companies, the old branding is still used in different places, it turns out it integrates with 5 other of your products that it might affect, that you realize that this is actually quite a confusing space a lot of the time. Don't expect a security researcher to understand your ecosystem. Be prepared to ask them a lot of questions about, are you sure this is the actual product that it's in? Moving on then, how can we make the validation of these potential vulnerabilities better? Please, please, please don't trust proof of concepts. You are taking unvalidated code, potentially, from an unvalidated source. These people are likely security literate. Every avenue that you are taking input from is a potential attack vector. Please have a process for analyzing proof of concepts in a safe manner. Sandbox them in some manner. Just don't blindly trust that you're going to be getting something useful. Again, you're going to see some continuing themes here. Realistic feedback time. We have found this, we're looking into this, we expect to give you an update in this amount of time. Silence invites confusion. Just any feedback, at least, hopefully shows the researcher you're being serious. Yes, they have their own timeline that they should disclose to you at the start, but this at least shows that you're engaging with the process. Having code owners for specific functionality. I don't know if anybody here has ever been in a meeting where they are discussing ownership over a rather serious vulnerability that has been reported to them. Those meetings have a huge number of very senior engineers in them, and none of them want to admit that the problem is in their area. Those conversations get heated very quickly, and they're ultimately super expensive and often not very productive. If you have code owners for specific functionality, you can approach it in a slightly different manner. Instead of the assigning of blame at the beginning, you go, right, what area is this issue in? Here are the people assigned to that area. Cut out everybody else who's not needed from those meetings and let the devs who understand that area actually analyze it. Means that they don't feel like they are being judged by all of their peers. They don't feel like they have eyes over their shoulders. And hopefully it means that they can get down to doing the actual work quicker. And then consider additional use cases. If the researcher is nice, they're probably going to give you some proof of concept code. They're probably going to give you some examples. If they're really nice, they might actually give you snippets of where they reverse engineered your product and tracked the code through. Just because they have given you this, it does not mean it is the only area in your product that is susceptible to this. Analyze and see if the same code patterns are used elsewhere. Is this in a shared library that's shared amongst multiple products or modules? Think about a small audit of your own code to see if these issues will be found elsewhere. Because if you don't find them before you put the patch out, I close to guarantee you someone else will after you've put the patch out. Then disclosing, the next step there. Clarifying the researcher's goal. Unless you're in business, this is going to be one of the hardest things for you personally to do unless you're high up in the business. One of the biggest things is that researchers love to publish blogs, love to publish POC because they've done a lot of work. They've found these issues in your product. Businesses hate that. There's nothing that businesses hate more than a nice blog post going up saying, hey, we found a big issue in this and this is how we found it and this is what you do to exploit it. They'll consider it, they'll say that you're violating this, that, and the other, that you're putting their users at risk. Ultimately, you need to remember if a researcher has come to you in this manner, you have no contract with them. They can drop it. They can drop blog. They can drop this close to at any point. They are not beholden to you. So it's better to engage with them and clarify with what they are going to be publishing, and hopefully you can draw your own business publications alongside that. So you can. Discussing this is a very good thing to do overall, and it avoids conflicts happening later on. Security research is a very small community. Word gets around quick about what vendors are good and bad to work with, and those reputations matter. The amount of times that I have talked to a researcher I don't know, and they go, when it comes to this vendor, this vendor, this vendor, if I find stuff with it, I will simply not engage with them because I've had such bad experiences with them in the past. You don't want that to happen. Try to build a good rapport. Coordinate on CVE creation. This is one of the most complex steps to do because everybody has their own opinion on it. It really depends on what sort of researcher you're dealing with. If you're dealing with an independent researcher, it might make more sense for you as the product owner to go and create the CVEs, get in contact with the CNA LR if you're not registered, or start that process within your company itself if you are a CNA. A lot of the times, and especially nowadays, people might come to you through dedicated research organizations. Either because they're part of a business, ZDI is part of Trend Micro, who go and do a bunch of this work. They will understand the process a lot better than you will, so it might make more sense for them to go and do it. Regardless of who's doing it, coordinate. What is the description of the vulnerability? What are the products it actually affects? What is the risk associated with it? There's often scoring systems, CVSS, alongside these. You don't want a big surprise whenever these CVE records come out for either party, so again, talk about it. And then provide a realistic time to patch. Silence invites confusion. Again, half of these are basically saying talk to the person. Priorities change, needs change. Update them as to what the current timeline is, but again, if there's any product managers in here, just because you change the timeline doesn't mean the researcher changes the timeline. If you deprioritize this, you need to be prepared for the researcher to just go, that's great, I'm proceeding with my original timeline on this. A lot of researchers will typically work with a 60-day or a 90-day disclosure window of, hey, I have told you about this, this is the amount of time you have before I release this publicly, regardless of if you have a patch or not. Sounds bad if you're from a development point of view, but it's not until you have been dragged along for a year by a company that you realize that, hey, if I don't put a timeline on this, they often don't resolve it. And then finally, how can we make the deploying of these fixes for this better? please, 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 from a man who worked in vulnerability automation for a long time, provide a well-structured advisory. If you're looking through 50 different vulnerabilities in a single vendor's products, you will probably see 30 different formats for how they decide to tell you that you're vulnerable about it. No consistency whatsoever. It slows everything down from your customer perspective. And from a security company perspective, having these well-formatted advisories, or even better, a machine-readable feed, if anybody can do that for me, I'd be really appreciative, allows us to automate this stuff so much quicker. So it does, which should make it easier for your customers to actually address it, and also allow the companies that they use for their vuln management or other cybersecurity tooling to alert them of the actual issue that they need to resolve. Credit the researcher. Very simple. Often ignored. Again, this is a very small community of people who are consistently pumping out new original vulnerabilities. So it is building a good relationship and getting people on side early in that community can make your life so much easier when it comes to these things. Where if you do have an issue and all of a sudden the timeline needs to change and you have a good history of working with researchers, they're more likely to actually allow that to happen because they know you're not pulling their leg. They know that you're serious about this. Continue to monitor. Fixes and patches will often get analysed more than the original product. I know half of the security researchers that I know, if they see a big vulnerability in a patch come out, the first thing they're doing in the morning is getting a cup of coffee, reversing that patch, and seeing if they can find a way to bypass it. Monitor for similar issues being reported, monitor for the indicators of compromise that you saw from the previous vulnerability or could have seen from the previous vulnerability, because one big vuln in a product often leads to a lot more scrutiny over that product. Have a look at Crush FTP from sort of a year ago. 1 or 2 big vulns dropped for it, and then there was just this wave of rather large vulnerabilities that came out with it. Attention attracts attention, so be on higher alert. And then finally, this is for your customers, provide mitigation information. It's a sad reality that upgrade the latest is the right thing to do, but if you're a defender, you know how difficult that can be on occasion. You have bureaucracy to deal with. You might have like we need to get these patches approved. We need to go through our emergency patching guide. Not always achievable. Please give your customers some information on how to mitigate it as opposed to resolve it. Talk about what features can be disabled. Talk about what configurations can be used to help minimize their exposure overall. So it is. This has all been a guide, assuming that the researcher is working with you in good faith, that they are giving you something genuine, and that they are in it for good purposes. There are plenty of people who are going to engage in bad faith. There are plenty of people who are going to be trying to waste time, and there are plenty of people who are going to send you, for lack of a better way of putting it, absolute rubbish. So it's important to get these processes down so that when all that filtering is done at the beginning, you're actually engaging in getting stuff done in a structured manner, that you don't end up like Ivanti at the beginning of this, and you're just like, oh yes, we'll go do this. Well, actually, no, we need to go and change to this. And then 6 months later or so, your customers are put in a really bad state when all of this stuff gets released and you have no solution for it. Well, thank you very much for listening. Any questions from anybody around it?
Thank you. I really enjoyed your talk. I discovered an interesting issue a couple of months ago where, well, it was a potential vulnerability in an open source project.
Yes.
But I wasn't sure, does this constitute a vulnerability or a feature that should exist to prevent a vulnerability being escalated?
Yeah.
And initially, I reported it as an issue on their GitHub, but then after asking me for proof of concept, which I provided, and then I was kind of like, oh, maybe this was a vulnerability, but then they've done nothing about it, and it's public on their GitHub. What would be the next steps to approach?
Next steps, I would there's a couple of companies that exist that are specifically there to help people get security advisories through, get CVEs assigned. I'm going to rep VulnCheck because I know some of the folks who work there and they're excellent, so they are. They have a service where essentially you can go and submit information and they'll try to get the CVE created for you. They probably will be willing to help. To be blunt, the CNAs of last resort are also an option, but they probably aren't going to respond to you because MITRE is in kind of a bad state at the minute, and CISA is a US government agency, so a lot of them aren't getting paid, and a lot of them got fired. So, and Red Hat's a huge down. I'd recommend reaching out to some of the companies like VonCheck and stuff like that who have services they offer for putting CVEs through, because at the very least they should be able to turn around and go, nah, this doesn't count.
Yeah. A potential follow-up question to that, and I'll leave it after that, is like, I imagine a lot of people probably get imposter syndrome about disclosing vulnerabilities as well. Any interesting comments on that?
Okay, so somebody I know, we were looking at a product, it was an Adobe product, I forget the name of it. This is why you should never feel imposter syndrome. Someone pointed out that one of their APIs, which they used to control reboot over system, was entirely unauthenticated and couldn't be used. And we were sort of sitting there going, there's no way that's the case. You've set it up wrong, so there's no way. It was the case. It was a real vulnerability. A CVE got assigned. Remember that even if you have imposter syndrome there are plenty of developers who have no clue about security. So never underestimate how simple an issue you can find, is the bottom line there. And to be blunt, it's the same with imposter syndrome and everything. It's one of those things that as you immerse yourself more and more in the space, you'll kind of begin to get over it. And as you talk to more and more people in the space, you'll kind of begin to get over it as you begin to sort of get amped up by them.
Thank you.
Always. Any other questions? Oh, behind you, I think, over there.
Could you give us a super quick overview of the CVSS program, how that works? I believe it's a severity rating for it.
Yes.
Is that governed in the same way? And just a quick overview.
So the answer to that is no. In terms of, I will give you the overview, but it's not really governed in that way. CVSS, a common vulnerability scoring system. It is a scale from 0.0 to 10.0 to tell you how bad a vulnerability is. Because yes, responding to vulnerabilities is important, but if it's a post-authentication, it causes the screen to flicker, not important. If it allows me to brick your system or pull all your data, it's important. Helps you prioritize vulnerabilities. In terms of how that generally works, typically the CNA that you respond to is the person who is going to be putting in the score that they think is right for that. Now, there is a process where you can then go to the CVE program and try to object to that. One of the issues that is present in the CVE program at the minute is that vendors are hugely preferred over individual security researchers, so you're unlikely to have that happen. In terms of how do you actually assign a CVSS score to something, you have to look at the individual exploit. Can I run this remotely? If yes, it's probably a network-based vuln. Do I have to be local? It's going to be local. Go through each of those individual fields and line it up. If you're putting in a submission yourself, I would always recommend that you put in a suggested CVSS score based off of your proof of concept and what it could be run on, and then let the company object to that. Because it means if they publish something and you really don't like it and you think that they're really trying to lowball the score, you can turn around and post your blog going, hey, this is what I said. They provided no actual feedback to why they changed this. They're artificially lowering the score. So it's because one of the reasons I assume that you're they're raising this is that businesses always have an incentive to keep those CVSS scores as low as possible. Researchers have an incentive to keep those CVSS scores as high as possible. In theory, it's supposed to balance out. Unfortunately, at the minute, vendors have much more sway in the program than researchers do. It's one of the reasons why it's getting so much critique at the minute. Did that actually answer your question?
Yeah, no, perfect.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Samuel.
No
I think we need to finish up now.
100%.
If anyone else has any questions, I'm sure you can
I will be
ask.
outside, ambush me about anything. It's grand.
Thank you very much.